Anatomy 32, Chapter 12, the Cardiovascular System, Blood. Topics, leukocytes and thrombocytes. So, again, in the red bone marrow, we have the pluripotent stem cell, which from it comes all of the different kinds of leukocytes found in the bloodstream. This includes the granular eosinophils, basophils, neutrophils, and the agranular monocytes and lymphocytes, which can be broken down into T lymphocytes, B lymphocytes, and natural killer cells. So here they are, as seen under a light microscope. The eosinophils, basophils, and neutrophils, which are the granular leukocytes, and the lymphocytes and monocytes, which are the agranular leukocytes. And they are awfully pretty in color for something called white blood cells, and that's because blood slides are stained in order to allow you to see some of the features of these white blood cells. And the one called granular leukocytes are called that because you can see these granules in the cytoplasm. The agranular leukocytes, you don't really see them. All right, basophils, they are round. They have within them these large, round, blue, dark purple granules. There are so many of them that you can't see the nucleus, but if you could, it's a two-lobe nucleus. And basophils are larger than erythrocytes, larger than red blood cells. Their functions normally is to release enzymes to intensify inflammation, to make inflammation more severe, which can be helpful in fighting an infection in a localized area. However, it's also been found that basophils can get involved in the hypersensitivity reactions, aka allergic reactions to compounds and substances that are not dangerous to the body. Then we have the eosinophils. They're a type of leukocyte with these large red-orange granules found throughout their cytoplasm. They have a 2 to 3 lobed nucleus, usually connected by strands, so it's technically one continuous structure. They are larger than red blood cells, larger than erythrocytes. The function of eosinophils is to release enzymes to counter inflammation, including in allergic reactions. So we have one white blood cell, one leukocyte that stimulates inflammation, and another, the eosinophils, that counters inflammation, because again, inflammation is only good for short periods of time in localized places. Turns out eosinophils are also involved in phagocytosis of parasitic infections, so they're involved in engulfing and destroying parasites, especially parasitic worms. So eosinophils can help destroy parasitic infections such as parasitic worms. And it's also been shown that they can be involved in some autoimmune diseases. So counters inflammation and helps to destroy parasites like worms. Neutrophils have these evenly distributed light purple lilac granules throughout the cytoplasm. They have a nucleus that's 2 to 5 lobed, again still connected by strands, so multi-lobed nuclei, and they are larger than red blood cells. Neutrophils also engaged in phagocytosis, so they will surround, ingest, engulf bacteria and dead cell matter. They are considered a general phagocytosis cell, so they will engulf anything that they think does not belong, and they are active in both the bloodstream and in other tissues of the body. When they engulf a pathogen, they then expose that pathogen to the contents of the lysosomes, which we know have lots of digestive enzymes. Also, sometimes during the process of phagocytosis, they will poke holes into the microbe using proteins called defensins. So poke holes in the microbes, killing them, engulf them, and then break them down with the lysosomes. Monocytes have a sort of blue-grayish cytoplasm. Their nucleus is shaped kind of like a kidney or a horseshoe, but it is one big structure, and they are larger than a red blood cell. Monocytes are inactive in blood. However, when they enter tissues, when they leave the bloodstream and enter the tissues, they differentiate into macrophages. And then the macrophages will engage in phagocytosis. They will engulf microbes and cellular debris. So similar function as neutrophils. However, the monocytes must leave the bloodstream, become macrophages, and then the macrophages engage in phagocytosis. And then we have the lymphocytes. Lymphocytes are possessing of cytoplasm that is sort of sky blue in color. However, you often see very little cytoplasm because the nucleus, which is round or slightly dented, takes up the bulk of the cell. So mostly nucleus, some cytoplasm, and they can be the same size as red blood cells or bigger. So the same size as red blood cells or bigger. And they have a variety of functions in the specific immune response. So lymphocytes can be broken down into subcategories. You have the B lymphocytes, the B cells. These cells become plasma cells that produce antibodies, antibodies that will bind to specific antigens, so targeting structures on the surface of pathogens, things that shouldn't be in the body. Then there are the T lymphocytes. T lymphocytes includes the helper T cell. Helper T cell controls the specific immune response. It causes the specific immune response to occur. And then also in T cells, we have the cytotoxic T cells. Cytotoxic T cells attack infected body cells. So they attack cells of our body, our own cells, that are infected with a specific pathogen. So say you have a cytotoxic T cell against influenza, it will destroy body cells infected with influenza virus. It will not attack other body cells, even if they're infected with stuff. They'll only attack body cells infected with influenza and destroy it. So it's a specific response to a specific pathogen. And T cells both mature in the thymus. And then the third big category, natural killer cells. Natural killer cells are lymphocytes that destroy any abnormal body cell. So if this body cell seems abnormal, is it infected with something? Is it becoming cancerous? Whatever, the natural killer cell will destroy those abnormal body cells. All right, so here again is the 5 leukocytes that you can see in the bloodstream using a light microscope. Sometimes, depending on what is wrong with you, you may have an increase in the numbers of one of these kinds of lymphocytes. That would be called leukocytosis. So for instance, if you were infected with hookworms, you could get a significant increase in eosinophils that are being mass-produced to destroy those hookworms. And when you go get a blood test, one of the things they check is the differential white blood cell count. So they use a computer to count the different kinds of leukocytes in your bloodstream. And if they see an abnormal number of one or more, that can help them better understand what is wrong with you, if anything. Leukemia. Leukemia is a cancer of the red bone marrow. And what happens is the red bone marrow ends up mass producing abnormal, non-functioning white blood cells. And also, as a consequence, interferes in the production of other blood cells. So here is a cartoon of normal blood with lots of red blood cells, some nice, healthy white blood cells, some platelets. Here is an image of cartoon image of blood from someone with leukemia. You see lots of these abnormal leukocytes that cannot do anything useful, and fewer red blood cells, fewer of the other kinds of white blood cells, fewer platelets. So clearly this person would have a lot of problems, anemia, difficulty in forming blood clots to prevent bleeding out, lots of problems. The main treatment, the most common treatment, is to replace the red bone marrow in the person with leukemia with red bone marrow from someone else who is a good genetic match. So you have the person with leukemia, the recipient. They take anti-cancer drugs and radiation therapy to destroy their red bone marrow, to destroy the cancerous red bone marrow. Then a healthy donor has red bone marrow removed, and it is injected into some of the bones of the recipient, now giving the recipient healthy red bone marrow that will produce all the blood cells they need. Again, it is very important that the donor is a very good genetic match to the recipient, because we do not want the new immune response in the recipient to attack their own body. That would not be good. All right, then we have the thrombocytes, also produced in the red bone marrow. And the thrombocytes, also known as platelets, start off as these megakaryocytes. These megakaryocytes then stay in the red bone marrow, and then they bleb off little portions of themselves. And that is what the thrombocytes are. The thrombocytes are these little bitty cell fragments that came from the original megakaryocyte. The thrombocytes are therefore formed elements. They are much smaller than the cells. They don't have any organelles. They're just these little disc-shaped structures that are tiny compared to all the rest of the blood cells. Their functions include releasing chemicals to promote blood clotting, so they get the signal that there's damage to tissue, and they will release these chemicals from vesicles found within them, and this will initiate the formation of the protein structures that form the blood clot. Specifically, it causes fibrinogen, a plasma protein, to turn into fibrin. And fibrin then forms these huge meshes of protein filaments that form the blood clot. Also, platelets can form what's called a platelet plug. They will attach to the ends of damaged blood vessels and then attach to each other and basically close off that blood vessel. But that only works on really small blood vessels. All right, on the exam, you will see a slide on the screen, and you will have to be able to identify some of the different kinds of blood cells that you can see in blood. So you will have to be able to identify and name these cells using terms like neutrophil, monocyte, lymphocyte, eosinophil, basophil, erythrocyte, and thrombocyte. Again, erythrocyte, don't write red blood cell, and thrombocyte, don't write platelet. And that is it for Chapter 12.